I went with a friend to Tobermory on the tip of the Bruce Peninsula, and we went over to Flower Pot Island, and there was a man guiding us around. And I said to him, "Are there any native orchids growing around here?" And he said, "Well, there's a very special little one called Calypso, but I'm not going to show you where it is because you'll come back here with a trowel and dig it up." And I said, "I just want to do a drawing so I can do an engraving of it." So, at a certain point, he said, "Now, the orchid you're interested in is about 6 feet in. You can go in on your hands and knees, but be careful what you do with your toes that you don't disturb something else here. And then once you're there, you can just squat down nearby and you can draw it." So I did a drawing of Calypso, which is, of course, a magical name in itself. The plant is about 5 inches high and the flower less than an inch across, but it looks like it's going to fly away.
This particular cottage is a Cape Cod sort of salt box style. It's very, very unique. There are very, very few of them left. I also think in some ways 77 Brunswick is aspirational as well. And I say it's aspirational because although it's quite small, and it was obviously, this is a working family's home, the fact that they put that Greek Revival flourish on the front with the pillars, that's making a statement. That's saying we have aspirations. And I love that little flourish. I think it really makes it a special, special house.
Like a lot of people, I did a bit of drawing as a kid. I don't think I showed any promise. But when I went to university at McMaster, I chose a fine arts program. And it was only really close to the end of those 4 years that I decided I wasn't going to be a curator, but I would want to be an artist involved in making it. I love working with wood. And another thing is that although I have a beautiful printing press now, you can create prints with burnishing the paper on the block instead of using a press. My very first little block was a little block like this, a little tiny block. And by the end of doing that, I thought, this is wonderful. But I think the most was that the end product was so beautiful. My very first block is of a little fern plant, and this is a print from it. So that's where I started. That's how wood engraving started for me.
We were an immigrant family. We arrived from the Netherlands in 1947. We were among the first of the Dutch post-war immigrants to arrive. We lived on the farm in Terrace in the north of British Columbia until 1956. The three of us growing up in Terrace had a freedom of growing up that is hard to imagine for people nowadays. The boys both had gardens and learned about gardening and farming from our dad. They both learned about carpentry from our dad. And both Jock and Gerard now show themselves in their work to be enormously skilled with materials and tools. And that family ethic of saying, we can do that ourselves. You see that in Gerard's career. He has been saying for 60 years, oh yeah, I can learn how to do that. I can learn how to bind books. I can learn how to make paper. I can learn how to weave fabric. It's a mental attitude of saying, yes, I can learn to do that.
The first stage in the process of making a wood engraving is drawing, sketching the project. In this case, it's a mill on Île aux Coudres in Charlevoix County in Quebec. This is what it looked like when I sketched. The sketch was in a sketchbook, but I wanted to make it the size that the block was going to be. So I do it all like this, and then I turn it over, which will reverse the drawing. It's now backwards, and I will have held my block here and drawn from there onto the block. That is then all to be engraved, and when it's ready, it'll get printed the other way around. So for that, you've got an example here of a finished block, which is backwards, printed onto the paper that way so that it's going to be the right way around, and that's the way I wanted it to be.
At the age of 9, I was learning a second language, English. And I think one of the things that helped me to become a writer was learning a second language, because it made me aware of language in a way that most kids of age 9 are not. The different ways there are of saying things. The other was that because we lived in a small town in the north of BC, there wasn't a great deal to do except read. And in that strange and difficult new environment, reading became a safe place. It was a place where I could be. By the time I was 32, I had my first book published, but that was actually the 4th book that I had written. My first books were historical fiction. I had 5 award-winning historical fiction books for young people. I taught myself to be the kind of historian that I needed to be in order to write the books that I wanted to write. So I was bringing all this experience in researching history and in writing biography to what I was writing about Gerard, and also to the collaboration with him, because that often also involved historical research.
The best wood for wood engraving is boxwood. And all wood engraving is done on the end grain, the standing grain. A plank would have grain lying flat. If you worked in that, it would be a woodcut. But when you turn it up and you use different tools called burins, you're doing wood engraving. Most of my work is quite small. I like small, but I have done blocks of about this size a few times, and I wouldn't tackle it now, but there was a time when I felt that I should be doing that. So it's a question of recognizing that this is my medium and this is what I can do with it. This is a painting of the house in Holland where I was born. I was born upstairs in that little house in 1942. Marianne first met me when I was about 2 hours old. I was born at home, and when everything was cleaned up and the baby was in bed with Mama, Marianne was brought in to meet her baby's brother. And she's been a very important presence in my life ever since. That was the middle of the war in the Netherlands, you can imagine. So your family was your whole social life as well. So being together and doing things together and belonging together was established very firmly. Every time we moved, we lost our friends, but there was Marianne. And so it's just natural that we should think of each other as people, as someone we could work with. But some of the qualities that are really important is that Marianne and I are both detail people. We love detail, and we love getting every detail just right. And Marianne is a very, very thorough craftsperson in her writing. And being a craftsperson myself, that, of course, is very harmonious. It's like this house. It was built by craftspeople, and you can sense that. What I'm doing here is very much what Gutenberg invented, what was called movable type. So I have all the letters, punctuation, numbers, and in separate little compartments here. And I am setting the last line of a very brief verse that I wrote, and that we're going to print from. The typeface I use is called Libra, and you'll see that that appears in most of the handmade books we look at. This type is made of an alloy of lead, zinc, and antimony. I bought the type in various places to be able to have one typeface in a lot of different sizes. I think I have 8 sizes. There. So that's the type. Now I fill up that line with spacing material because all the spaces have to be full. There we go. So this is the last line, and I'm going to bring that over to the printing press. Successful collaborations between siblings that continue over many years are quite rare. And I've been thinking what it is about ours that has made it work so well. I think that it is because our relationship has a very solid foundation. We come from a family background where art and writing were considered important to the quality of life. Our first trip back to the Netherlands, we visited an aunt of our father's who was a painter, and she lived on a houseboat in a canal.
The significant thing, I think, for Gerard was that it showed how a person could shape a lifestyle around the dedication to art. Because when she had exhausted the painting subjects where her houseboat was moored, she would have the houseboat moved to a different location and have a whole new set of subjects for painting.
Every time I sit down to sew a book together, I think back to the time when I was in grades 3 and 4, and we lived in northern British Columbia, close to the Alaska border. And my teacher was a Mr. Wilson from England. He was a retired British Army colonel. And the winters were cold, and at noon hour we couldn't go out into the playground. And so each teacher would do something. And Mr. Wilson wanted to do bookbinding with us at noon hour, partly because he thought it was good teaching, a good training for us, but partly because the textbooks after the Depression and the war were in deplorable condition. And Mr. Wilson wanted them quite ship-shape. So what I'm going to do now is what Mr. Wilson taught me.
The idea for the book Under This Roof came from Gerard, who wanted to celebrate the 150th anniversary of this house.
It was an important birthday, and it needed to be commemorated with something, and a book is something we can do. On the cover, I show a little roof, and then this is the linoleum block print that I printed onto the linen cloth. The end paper here is quite plain, but it's a sheet I made myself, and the little speckles in here are pieces of onion skin.
The house was built in 1866 by Donald Bain MacDonald, who was a local builder, and it was built in the Greek Revival style.
This particular building is rare because it is not one of these fancy brick buildings. It was built by a working family, the MacDonalds. It is in its original state, so many of the older buildings have a new facade, or they've had additions on the back, or somebody's gone up, or the building's just gone. So in many cases, you know, if it's been renovated, you can't see what it looked like. But this cottage was not changed. And so it makes it a really singular example of a building from 1866 where we can see the footprint, we can see how people lived, we can see many of the original details.
Around 1916, the Creasy family moved in and rented it. Then it went through several owners. By 1978, it was in very dilapidated shape. Jim Anderson saw it and recognized that it was a historic building, and so he bought it.
James Anderson is a really seminal figure in the heritage movement in Stratford. He was the first archivist for Perth.
So these 33 boxes are Jim's miscellaneous files, just as he created them.
And he helped establish the archives. He was very involved with the museum as well. He actually established what is now called Heritage Stratford Committee.
He was both a museum curator and an archivist unofficially before either of those bodies was set up.
Right? Sure. Things that he's pulled together under different topics.
He was involved in Heritage at a really pivotal moment because this was the 70s and 80s. So this was in a time when bulldozing some of these old buildings became very popular.
He was relentless, and I think he generated newspaper attention and radio, and as a result, I think he made other people aware of what we could lose if we continued to tear down buildings.
In April 1981, he climbed on top of the Perth County courthouse and began a hunger strike. In what he later described as an act of desperation to catch the public eye, Anderson took a sleeping bag to the roof and settled in for a hunger strike. On his way, he dropped off a letter to the editor of the Beacon Herald, stating that, "To me, Stratford is the most beautiful place to live, and the county is full of wonderful people. Why should it be turned into a cultural desert?"
I mean, he wasn't afraid to walk the talk, you know, and he was going to get his point across if that's what it took. I think his contribution is probably immeasurable. When he took on the Brunswick project, it wasn't surprising to me that he threw himself into it, and he really did.
In 1985, he started a 2-year-long renovation of the building.
But he was restoring. He was taking the building back to the way it was. He was going to make it as accurate as possible. And I think that was a reflection of the way he was generally.
He actually had to redo all of the foundations. He had to pick it up, redo the foundations, put it back down. I mean, most people would never have bothered. But because he did, we have something that really reflects Stratford of an age and a time where very few of these buildings remain. He actually had it designated under the Ontario Heritage Act in 1985.
Marks in the paint led him to conclude that there had originally been a portico with attached fluted pilasters and 2 detached columns in the Doric style. The whole recessed doorway casing was removed, repaired, and reinserted, and a new portico added, now one of the distinctive features of the house. The door and its casing, including the transom, the fluted pilasters, and the denticulated cornice, are among the marks of the Greek Revival. Other such features are the 6/6 double-hung sash windows, the eared trim on the outside of each window, and the eave returns.
There was an open house.
There were about 700 people through that day. And it was exciting because such a different range of people.
I went through the house and talked to Jim. He was there sort of hosting and talking to people. And it was remarkable.
It was people, wall to wall. He did the advertising part, and we just opened the doors when the people arrived. And then I had family in the rooms to guide the people the way Jim sort of wanted them to go in the front door and out the back.
You know, here's a guy who, I don't know what skills he brought to the table in terms of, other than the obsession of being accurate and being right. So I think I could walk into that house and say, if this is what he says should be here, I would buy that. And I think a lot of other people did as well.
Because he did the restoration. So this was his day. We looked at it that way. This was his day. We bought it right from Jim. I went in the house and that was it. I walked in the back door and it was mine. It was home. We loved the house so much, just the way it was, with his choices. because it was perfect for our lifestyle. He had it completed the way he wanted it. So I really didn't have a lot to say other than I did the stenciling in the kitchen floor and I did the stenciling around the dining room. And I think Gerard said there's still some stenciling under the sink. Jim asked Darcy to build the cupboards that he had designed. So all the carpentry work, where cupboards were concerned, were Darcy. Well, we looked at it like we were buying the biggest antique we ever bought, because we had collected antiques for 30 years and restored them. And our love was Canadiana, so the house fit perfectly. It was a workman's cottage.
Norma and Keith had this fabulous collection of Canadiana. It was like a museum, but they were living in it, and it was beautiful. And I just loved the house. I like small. I don't like big spaces, and it is a small house. And basically, I fell in love with it right then and there. It took me 14 years before I was able to buy it. Fine, but I did. Part of the consideration is just the reality that if I wanted to make a living as an artist, I needed to earn from my art, and I didn't want to have a day job at something else. And so I decided to have a shop and sell. The location is very important, because I was going to have one room as a little shop to sell my art. And for that, you have to be located where pedestrians are coming by. And so the best place for people walking by was Brunswick. It's a wonderful space. I mean, this was the dining room. I can do everything here except when I was a paper maker, I had to do that outside because you have buckets and buckets of water. You don't want to do that on 150-odd-year-old pine floors. There's a little tiny bedroom off the side there, perfect for me. There's a kitchen, everything is in a lovely sort of comfortable size and space. And it's made by craftsmen. The doors are well made, the baseboards are well made, everything is well made. If you look at how they've joined boards in the floor, they're all just fitted perfectly. You know, that's very rewarding for somebody who likes to get little details right. So the book needs its covers now. It has been sewn, and I'm going to glue the front cover on, and then it will be pressed. The fabric that I'm putting around these books was curtain material that came to us from one of our grandmothers in the Netherlands. When the edges of that cloth have been all folded down, I attach the end paper onto the inside of the cover. I dyed this end paper by a sort of a tie-dye process that I've worked out for this. So this has all been done by me as well, using actual pieces of plants for the dye sources. When the book is at this stage, you will see there's a sort of a little depression here which I created. And the intention of that is that I will do an insert of a piece of veneer of actual wood that will fit in there. And then that brings us to this, which is a complete book, which has the inlay in the veneer, and it has all the sheets sewn together and attached, and the two end papers in their places.
To me, it's significant because it's a remarkable combination of a house which is in itself historically significant with the work of an artist who's working in traditional arts and crafts fits beautifully with a historic house. If you try to imagine Gerard working in a modern building, you don't have anything like the resonance and the interaction. I believe that the house exerts an influence on how Gerard does things. Here he is beavering away at his engraving table, surrounded by the aura of a historic house. It seems to me that there's got to be a subtle influence there that supports and favors what he does.
When 77 Brunswick was built, most of the jobs were laborers working in smaller industries like lumber and some of the other smaller industries around the town, or they were craftsmen. He's sort of taken that idea that James Anderson had for a Museum of the Working Man, and he's put it into action.
I think actually it was Norma who first mentioned it to me. At first I was thinking about that as a working man who was maybe working at the railway yards. That's the kind of people who were here long ago. I had doubts about it being a museum.
But to an extent it is, and he's showing how the practice of a working artisan has been passed down for actually centuries. It still has validity, and it still is something that works in a very modern context.
I'm not sure I could fulfill the kind of museum that Jim, had in mind, but in a sense, the working man's home and studio, and if the studio is open to the public, at least to some visitors or some events like, the doors open event, it could still be accessible to the public at times, even if it doesn't live up to government standards for being a regular museum.
That looks about right to me. That angle is good.
I have kept up the paint in the early years. I can't go up ladders anymore, so I can't do it all, but I can do something like the painting. And I have done little repairs, but I've had some important repairs done by others.
I've been a friend of Gerard's for about 10 years. And he said, I'm looking for a block roughly 14 inches by 3 inches by 4 inches. And I said, that I can do. Gerard and I worked through it and fine-tuned the measurements and where the groove was and what the angles were roughly, rather than try to glue it in place or screw it in place, because each of those would make it really hard to take off next time somebody wants to fix it. That we're going to drill 2 angled holes at each end and nail it into the wall.
When I came here, there was modern asphalt shingle on the roof, which is not, of course, what it would have had built in 1866. You need sawn cedar shingle, and that's because 3 years before the house was built, they started a mill for sawing shingles down at the river. So I started looking around, and I was able to find a sufficient number in St. Catherine's, and then I knew Ross and Ray Kipfer. Their grandfather had taught them how to install cedar shingles on the roof of the family farm in Waterloo County, and they, as boys, learned how it was done. So this is the parlor of the house, and in the time when it was built, the house was considered a house and not a cottage, because at that time, if you had a parlor, it was a house. And if you had a parlor, you could invite the minister and his wife to tea, because they couldn't be invited to a kitchen. And so it showed your social status of the time.
I think we have been incredibly lucky that the people who have owned the building that have followed James Anderson have very much been part of his vision. So they understood what they were getting into, that they were custodians of the heritage of the building and his vision.
On my left here is the back door of the house. This door was not originally here, and it's rather short because of the low ceiling. The original door was where the window at the end of the kitchen is, and that was no longer usable for a door. So Jim introduced this door here, and that leads to the back porch.
If you look right across smaller towns in Ontario, even if you looked at Toronto when it was much younger, this kind of building existed. This kind of working person's family, home and business and studio, that existed. And you're just not going to find it anymore anywhere else unless it is literally a museum. So it's really, really a special building, special people who have looked after it.
So this is a door then that leads up the stairs to 2 bedrooms. In 1881, the census recorded that this house was lived in by 13 people. Upstairs here, there's a bedroom to the right and one to the left, one for the girls and one for the boys. And Granny slept on the other side of my studio. There's a very, very small bedroom, and that was Granny's room. This room was probably the dining room of the house originally. I'm not sure how you seated 13 people here for a meal, but they seem to have managed. It has become my studio. I have my printing press, which is from 1865, so it's 1 year older than the house. And I brought it over from England. It's about 800 pounds of cast iron, but it's exactly the type of press that was being used for printing type and blocks when it was made. And when I wanted to buy it, I didn't have quite enough money. And so I phoned my mother, as one did in those days when you didn't have enough money. You phone mother, collect, right? And I said, Mom, I'm buying a printing press and I need some money. Now, if it had been my father, he might have said, oh, really? But mother, being a mother, said, yes, dear, how much would you like? And I said, I need 300 pounds. Fine, she said. And I gave her the information, which bank. She said, I'll have it telegraphed to that bank for you. And so I was able to pay for it and for the shipping. My whole career depends on having that press. Most of my work has been botanical. Our father was in horticulture. I'm quite an obsessive gardener. Orchids are in particular interest. At one time, I had over 300. So you can see how obsessive this can become, but it's lots of fun. I have an orchid named after me. And there's one called Remarkably striata. And I got a little plant of that and grew it. And when it was big, I shared it with a friend of mine, and he grew it enormously beautiful. So he brought it to the orchid shows. And when the judges award an orchid, the owner is allowed to choose the name. And so he called it Remarkably striata Gerard. We have in front of us the magnum opus of at least my career, and that is a book about the Grand River called A Peddle's Journey. This is a book with a cover for which I did the spinning, dyeing, and weaving of the cloth. And in the front cover are attached some small pebbles from the river that I picked out and handed to Marianne, who was standing in gum boots just beside me.
The title is based on the fact that when we were standing on the beach at Port Maitland at the mouth of the river, you picked up a little pebble about 2 inches long, oval and flat, and you handed it to me and said, "I wonder what this piece of stone looked like when it fell into the river some hundreds of kilometers upriver from here."
I had actually done a sketch and an engraving of the covered bridge at West Montrose, which crosses the Grand River. And I did that, and I thought, you know, this has the potential of being a first print of a book. And we thought, well, it's very sensible. It's all within sort of a day trip from Stratford, so we can get there. Marianne and I went from almost all of them. We went together to those sites. It's a long river, and we would sort of designate a little section that we would do. Well, sometimes I had a hard time finding anything I really liked to sketch. And Marianne said, yeah, but what about that bridge? If you, a little bit from a distance and you get both banks with it, maybe that, oh yeah, you know, that could do. It grows with little stages, and each one's putting a little bit in from their side, right? That's how it goes.
Gerard is busy sketching, and this is what I write about my perception of the scene. Above the cloud fly 2 airliners, their passengers' lives briefly crossing ours. Also intersecting with ours are those of the Mennonite people, whose use of this bridge is indicated by horse manure on the wooden deck. The silence barely interrupted by the planes and an invisible bullfrog is like a taproot into the past.
The book ends in a sort of an odd way. This is the mouth of the river, which is very wide and broad at Port Maitland. And so I couldn't possibly get all of that in one block, so I divided it into 2. The interesting part of it was that we were walking there, and I said to Marianne, I've never been here before, but somehow I can already see this place that we're going to. I said, there's going to be a long spit of sandy spit with a lighthouse on the end of it. And look what is there, a long spit with a lighthouse. And I said, and we had come over a dune, and there it was in front of us. I said, we have arrived. So that obviously got sketched too.
Yes.
And that's the closing for the book.
Heritage Stratford, which is actually an organization that James Anderson helped form, decided to start awarding a James Anderson Award on an annual basis to recognize renovation, restoration, and conservation that really spoke to his interest and passion in keeping the heritage alive in this city. We decided to give this award to Gerard under the cultural heritage merit for James Anderson. So we wanted to recognize Gerard's efforts not only to continue the preservation of that building, but also the fact that he had spent many years opening it up to the public. People were really interested in going inside and seeing what it was like.
There were definitely wonderful encounters with really delightful people who not only bought my work, but who gave me, how would I say, very warm feedback about the quality of the work, and who they told me, and I would get letters later or photograph We sent you a photograph with the prints on the wall, and we wanted you to see how we had them framed, and because they're so beautiful, and we see them every day. That kind of warm response is one of the benefits of having had the doors open for the people to come in. There is never any lack of moral support for what each of us is doing and sees the other doing.
We understand the artistic temperament and the art and the needs of artistic stimulation, and because we've moved around so much in our lives, we've always been important to each other for providing that artistic stimulus.
I think that the most basic aspect of that foundation is that we share a strong and mutual and genuine sisterly, brotherly love. Wood engraving is important to me because it's my passion, and I have been so incredibly fortunate to be able to make that passion my life's work and my income. And next year it will be 60 years. I will have fulfilled the most wonderful possible destiny I can imagine. Because the problem is, Lucinda, there are wrenches which we need for that, which were in the top drawer of this. Where is the top drawer? Is it already gone, or is it somewhere here?
Gerard sent me an email, and it said, I'm moving to a small apartment. I have to leave my press behind.
Fantastic. We've got them. All right. Okay, we've got them. All right.
I'm looking for an artist printmaker.
I didn't want it to go to a museum where it became an exhibit. Mm-hmm. And there you were, a printmaker.
Is this something that interests you?
So when you put it together, you need to be absolutely sure.
I couldn't believe Gerard was asking me.
And you know, this printing press, its technology was developed at the same time as wood engraving. Mm-hmm. And it is the absolutely most perfect press for wood engraving. Mm-hmm. These are held in place by those little square magnets. Right, yeah. So 1865, right? Yeah. Now, that is the date of the making. Mm-hmm. It's not very obvious. Mm-hmm. This is what's obvious, and I for years thought it was made in 1882. Wow. This is its serial number. Mm-hmm. Every individual press has a serial number. Mm-hmm. The 1882 press, which is not just an Albion, that all that information will be this Albion.
Wow. There are very few printmakers of his caliber in our country.
Is,
I mean, ever.
And you want the press that to come down on your work.
I mean, just like who you are goes into the block of wood. I mean, everyone who's touched that press or been with that press goes into the press and then into the printing.
Okay, so I thought that was a two-person job.
You know, it's printmaking for a reason. We imprint on each other and we imprint on the materials.
This comes down, and then you've got what we call the staple. This stuff stays in with the rails. So they go over there, and then the wedge goes to hold it. Okay. Yeah?
No, I'd like to have everything.
That's what we've got. Okay.
Okay. It's on lay down.
Put your fingers in. When you have it set up in your studio, I can come there and work on it with you and tax on. I mean, here I have the experience of the taking apart the rest of it.
Yeah.
But we can talk about some of the minor points of the use of it. And again, it has to be passed on with the best present and blocks and all of that.
Yes, absolutely, and I so look forward to that.
Yeah. Okay.
I feel so lucky that I'm going to be able to work with him.
It's important to me that it has the future as well, because I'm already part of this history.
Yes, you are, a large part. I can't even describe. I don't think I've ever had a mentor before with something, and this feels like something really close to that, and I'm really grateful. But this press opens up a whole new opportunity for us.
Yeah. It has a marvelous history. We don't know it all,
Right?
but it has a marvelous history. But it has a marvelous future. People sort of look at it as if this is the end of it. This is the end of one chapter and the first page of the next.